They said this role would change everything. Big studio. Big director. Big expectations. For her, it wasn't just another job, it was the one she'd been waiting for. She'd spent years in small productions, rehearsing in dim rooms that smelled of dust and sweat, pretending those cheap spotlights were Hollywood's glare. But this time it was real. Cameras, crews, contracts, and him. Her co-star. The kind of man whose name filled theaters, whose face sold tickets. And the first time their eyes met across the set, the script in her hands suddenly felt heavier. The scene was simple, a confrontation between lovers. The director, a perfectionist with too much caffeine in his system, wanted real tension. So they rehearsed. Over and over. Every glance sharpened. Every breath timed. By the sixth take, she wasn't acting anymore. He looked at her like he knew her, not the lines, not the character, her. It made her forget the cameras, the lights, the dozen pairs of eyes watching. When the director finally shouted, "Cut," she exhaled, trembling, trying to steady her hands. He smiled, just slightly. "Guess we made it look real," he said. She forced a laugh. "That's the point." But her voice sounded thin, like it belonged to someone else. Because deep down, she knew what no one else did. For one split second, it had been real. The next morning, her phone buzzed with a message she didn't expect. "You free this afternoon? The director wants us to run a few scenes together. Just us." Her stomach twisted, though she couldn't say why. She told herself it was just work, a professional thing, but she still checked her hair 3 times before leaving. The cafe near the studio was quiet, tucked between glass buildings that reflected the afternoon sun. He was already there, hoodie pulled over his head, sunglasses on the table, coffee untouched. When he looked up and smiled, the world seemed to slow down just enough for her to notice how dangerously easy it was to like him. They spent the first hour talking about the script, about their characters, about how love stories on screen rarely feel real. Then he said, almost absent-mindedly, "Maybe that's because people forget what real love feels like." Something in his tone made her look up. He wasn't talking about the film anymore. She laughed it off, flipping through her script. "You sound like you've lived too many scenes like this." He smiled faintly. "Maybe I just remember them better than most." They rehearsed for hours, changing lines, inventing moments the script didn't ask for. The director had told them to build chemistry. They built something else entirely. When they practiced the argument scene, he stepped closer than he needed to. When she raised her voice, his eyes didn't break from hers. And when the fake anger dissolved into silence, the air between them hummed with something that wasn't in the script. By evening, she realized she hadn't checked her phone once. Her husband had texted hours ago. "Dinner tonight? Miss you." She stared at the message, guilt blooming quietly somewhere in her chest. He noticed her expression. "Everything okay?" "Yeah," she said, too quickly. "Just tired." But she wasn't tired. She was alive, in a way she hadn't felt in years. As they packed up their things, he turned to her and said, "You make it easy to forget where the acting stops." She forced a smile, pretending to brush it off. But later that night, when she replayed the day in her head, she couldn't tell where the lines ended anymore either. By the 3rd week of shooting, the air on set had changed. Everyone felt it, though no one dared to say it aloud. The director, a man with sharp eyes and no patience for lies, noticed first. He didn't miss much. During one take, he stopped them mid-scene, waved a hand, and said, "You two, don't act. Just exist." She frowned. "What do you mean?" He smirked, leaning back in his chair. "You already feel it. Let the camera catch it." Everyone laughed lightly, but her throat tightened. She saw the smirk on her co-star's face too, the one that wasn't entirely about the joke. From that day, everything changed. The director began rewriting scenes. Adding glances that lasted too long, pauses that weren't in the script, moments where silence said more than dialogue. He'd walk up to her with his coffee and say things like, "We're chasing authenticity here, you two have it. Don't lose it." But authenticity was dangerous. Because when the camera rolled, she forgot to pretend. There was one scene, a quiet one, in a kitchen. Her character was supposed to look at him, conflicted, unsure. He leaned in just slightly, close enough that she could feel his breath when he whispered the line. Not the one in the script. His own. "You look at me like that off camera too." Her pulse skipped. The director shouted perfect, before she could react. Later, while reviewing footage, he called everyone over. "See this?" he said proudly, pausing the monitor on her face, that look, that half-second of real emotion. This is what love looks like." The crew clapped. She smiled awkwardly. But inside, she was burning. After wrap, he found her outside the studio, under the glow of the exit light. "You were amazing today," he said softly. "I wasn't acting," she wanted to say. But she didn't. Instead, she nodded. "Thanks." He smiled, not like a colleague, but like someone who already knew too much. That night, she lay awake, replaying that whisper in her mind. She tried to convince herself it was just part of the job. But deep down, she already knew, the job was the excuse, not the reason. It started as something innocent, or at least, that's what she told herself. He texted one night after filming wrapped late. "We should run that kitchen scene again before tomorrow." The timing felt off. She hesitated. It was almost midnight. "You mean now?" "Yeah. My place is closer to the studio. Just a quick run-through." Her fingers hovered over the screen. She could have said no. She should have said no. But instead, she wrote, "I'll be there in 20 minutes." The city was half asleep when she arrived. His apartment was modern, sparse, the kind of place built for someone who spent more time on sets than at home. He handed her a glass of water and motioned toward the living room. "We'll just do the dialogue once or twice." But they never made it past the first line. The air between them was heavy, not uncomfortable, just charged. Every word she said felt slower, weighted. Every pause between them stretched longer. And when she forgot one of her lines, he didn't stop. He just looked at her and whispered, "Don't act. Feel it." She did. For a moment, there was no script, no cameras, no husband waiting for her at home, only the sound of her heartbeat and his voice, quiet but sure. "You know, the director was right," he said softly. "We don't have to fake it." She took a step back, trying to laugh it off. "You're terrible at staying in character." He smiled, that half grin that always disarmed her. "Maybe that's because you make me forget I'm supposed to be one." They didn't touch. They didn't need to. The tension hung in the air, thick enough to drown in. After a while, he said, "We should stop. Before this becomes something else." "Something else?" He met her eyes. "You know what I mean." She looked down at her hands, suddenly aware of how close they were standing. "I should go," she whispered. "Yeah," he said. But he didn't move. When she finally turned toward the door, he said quietly, "You don't have to pretend with me." Her hand froze on the handle. Then she left, fast, almost running, her pulse still echoing his words. Outside, the city lights blurred as she tried to steady her breath. She'd gone there to rehearse a scene. But what scared her most was realizing, she hadn't been acting all night. The next morning, the set felt colder. She arrived early, hoping to slip past unnoticed, script in hand, hair tied back, head down. But it didn't matter. Everyone noticed when he walked in. Everyone always did. He greeted the crew with that easy confidence, the kind that filled the room without trying. When his eyes found hers across the set, she looked away too quickly. He caught it, she could tell. "Morning," he said as he passed her makeup chair. She forced a smile. Morning. That was it. Nothing more. Just two professionals saying hello. But the silence afterward buzzed louder than any line they'd ever rehearsed. They filmed 3 scenes that day. In each one, the director kept pushing for more connection, a deeper look, a slower touch, something that feels real. Every time he said it, she could feel her pulse in her throat. By lunch, she was exhausted from pretending nothing was wrong. She sat alone outside near the trailers, scrolling through her phone like it could anchor her to real life. Then his voice came from behind her. "You're avoiding me." She didn't turn. "I'm not." "Yeah, you are," he said softly. "You don't even breathe the same when I'm around." That made her look up, a mistake. Because he was close. Too close. The same quiet intensity in his eyes that had undone her the night before. "Last night was," she began. He interrupted. "A mistake?" She hesitated. "A moment." He nodded slowly. "You keep calling things moments. How many do we get before it means something?" Her heart pounded. "You need to stop." "I tried." "And?" He smiled sadly. "You ruined that plan." She stood, trying to steady her breathing. "We have to keep this professional." "I know." He took a step back, giving her space, but not enough. "But tell me you don't feel it. Just once. Lie to me if you can." She opened her mouth, but no sound came out. The assistant director called them back to set, breaking the spell. She walked away first, head high, eyes forward, but her hands were trembling. That afternoon, while filming, the director asked them to hold hands in a quiet scene. It should have been nothing. A simple gesture. But when his fingers brushed hers, she felt everything she'd tried so hard to bury come rushing back. And as the cameras rolled, she realized something terrifying: she couldn't tell anymore which parts of her were acting. For 3 days, she kept her distance. No late rehearsals. No lingering looks. No private conversations. She came to set, did her lines, smiled when she had to, and left the moment the camera stopped rolling. It almost worked. Until one night, after midnight, her phone buzzed. A message. From him. "I can't stop thinking about that night." She froze, the glow of the screen lighting up the dark room. Her husband was asleep beside her, his breathing slow, steady. She turned the brightness down and stared at the words. He'd never texted her like that before, no jokes, no excuses, no about work. Just the truth. She typed back. "You shouldn't be texting me." Deleted it. Typed again. "It was a mistake." Deleted that too. After a long pause, she finally wrote. "We can't do this." He replied almost instantly. "Then why are you still reading this?" Her chest tightened. She locked the phone and placed it face down on the nightstand. But her mind kept unlocking it again and again, replaying those words. By morning, she was exhausted, from guilt, from pretending, from wanting something she couldn't explain. Her husband kissed her on the cheek before leaving for work. She smiled like everything was fine. But the moment the door closed, she turned her phone over. Another message. "You felt it too. Stop pretending you didn't." She typed back, hands shaking. "We were just acting." Then came his reply. "Then why do you keep remembering it?" She didn't answer. She couldn't. Instead, she threw on her coat and went for a walk, the cold air biting at her skin. She ended up near the studio without meaning to. It was empty, just the quiet sound of wind brushing through the scaffolding, the faint hum of electricity in the lights above. She leaned against the wall, staring at the big metal doors that led inside. It hit her then, how dangerous silence can be. When she finally got home, her husband asked, "Rough day?" She nodded. "Yeah, just tired." He smiled, turned back to the TV, and didn't ask more. Her phone buzzed again. Tomorrow. One scene. Just us. She stared at the message for a long time. And even though she didn't reply, she already knew she'd go. She told herself it was just another day on set. Just another scene. But when she walked into the studio that morning, her pulse betrayed her. The lights were dimmer than usual, the air warmer. The director sat in his chair, talking quietly with the crew. He turned when she arrived, a smile tugging at his lips. Perfect timing. We're doing the apartment scene today. She nodded, pretending not to know what that meant, though she did. Everyone did. It was the scene. The emotional peak of the film, two lovers finally giving in, just before everything falls apart. The script said a kiss filled with hesitation and pain, but she knew words couldn't describe what they were about to do. He walked in moments later, hair slightly messy, script in hand. Their eyes met. No greeting. No small talk. Just that heavy silence that had followed them for weeks. The director explained the setup: long take, handheld camera, natural movement. I want truth, he said. Not performance. Then, almost casually, he added. You two can run it once alone first. Get the rhythm. And just like that, he left the room. The door shut. The room went still. Just her, him, and the echo of their breathing. They started rehearsing the dialogue, her voice trembling slightly, his steady and low. The lines were about love lost, about timing, about wanting someone you're not supposed to want. Halfway through, she forgot which part of it was acting. When his hand brushed her cheek, it wasn't scripted. When she leaned in, it wasn't either. Their eyes locked, and for a heartbeat too long, they didn't move. He whispered. You're shaking. So are you, she breathed. Then, like gravity pulling two planets together, it just happened. The kiss wasn't planned. It wasn't even hungry, it was quiet, desperate, real. Her fingers clutched his shirt, his hand slid to the back of her neck, and the world around them disappeared. When they finally pulled apart, the air felt thinner, heavier. Neither spoke. After a long silence, he whispered. You know that wasn't the scene, right? She swallowed hard. I know. Then what was it? She hesitated. I don't know anymore. He smiled softly, eyes full of something between guilt and relief. Then maybe we finally stopped pretending. The door opened behind them, the director, clapping once. Whatever that was, he said, do it again. That's real. She forced a laugh, stepping back, fixing her hair, pretending nothing had happened. But her heart was pounding too fast, and her lips still tingled with a truth she could never admit. That night, she didn't sleep. Because she realized she hadn't cheated in her marriage yet. But she'd already betrayed it. The day after the scene, everything on set felt different. The crew treated it like a success, they called it magic, chemistry, Oscar-level acting. But she couldn't even look at him without feeling her pulse climb. When she got home that night, her husband hugged her and said, "You look tired." She smiled automatically. Just a long day. But she didn't tell him that long meant dangerous. Later, while brushing her hair in front of the mirror, her phone buzzed. A message. From him. Line 47, you don't know what it's like to love someone you can't have. Maybe now you do. She froze, rereading it. It was from the script, one of his lines, one she'd heard 100 times before. But now it felt like a confession. She typed back. We're not in character anymore. A moment later. Then why do I still feel like we are? That message sat on the screen for a long time. She didn't reply. But she didn't delete it either. Over the next few days, the texts kept coming. Always disguised as work. He'd write things like, Page 63, the scene where she can't look him in the eye. Or, do you think love feels more like a line we memorize, or something we forget how to say? At first, she tried not to answer. But the silence between messages hurt worse than the guilt. So one night, she gave in. "I think love feels like a scene that went too far." He replied instantly. "Then what does that make us? The director's mistake?" She wrote. "No," he said. "The truth he didn't write yet." Something shifted after that. Their conversation stopped sounding like rehearsal and started sounding like longing. He'd tell her about growing up, about fame, about how lonely it felt to be adored by millions but known by no one. She told him about her marriage, how it used to feel safe, and how safety started to feel like emptiness. "Maybe we just met too late," he texted one night. "Maybe we met exactly when we needed to," she replied. And even though they never said the word love, every message was a substitute for it. By the end of the week, she stopped checking her phone around her husband. She told herself she wasn't doing anything wrong, no touching, no meeting, just words. But words can be just as dangerous. Because sometimes, all it takes to ruin a marriage is someone finally saying the right ones. The final day of shooting felt like the end of an era, at least for everyone else. For her, it felt like standing on the edge of something she didn't want to name. The set buzzed with laughter, applause, and champagne. The director gave his speech, the crew clapped, someone popped a bottle, and people hugged like they were saying goodbye to a family. She smiled, posed for photos, laughed at the right moments. But every time she looked around, her eyes searched for him. He found her first. Still in costume, still glowing with that unshakable calm that made her forget how to breathe. "We did it," he said quietly, handing her a glass of champagne. She smiled. "Yeah. We did." They toasted. The bubbles caught the light, shimmering like tiny lies. Then he leaned in slightly, his voice barely above the music. "A few of us are heading out after this. Nothing formal. Just a drink to celebrate. You should come." She hesitated. "Who's going?" "Just, people who won't talk." The words hung between them, dangerous and tempting. She knew what he meant, and what he didn't say. By the time she got home, the house was dark. Her husband had already fallen asleep on the couch, the TV humming quietly. She stood there for a long time, watching him, the man who'd once been her whole world. Then she whispered something she didn't mean to say out loud. "I'll just be gone an hour." The bar was small, tucked away behind a row of streetlights that flickered like they were keeping secrets. He was there, waiting in the corner, jacket off, sleeves rolled up. When she walked in, his expression softened, relief mixed with something more dangerous. "I didn't think you'd come," he said. "I shouldn't have," she replied. "But you did." They talked about the film at first, the reviews, the pressure, the strange emptiness that comes when a project ends. But then he said, quietly, "You know what I'll miss most?" "What?" "The parts where I didn't have to act." Her breath caught. "Don't. You think I don't know what this is? That I don't know it's wrong? Then why are we here?" "Because pretending we're fine hurts more than this." He reached across the table, brushing his fingers against hers. It was barely a touch, just enough to feel it. Her heart raced. Every reason to leave vanished behind the sound of his voice. "Come with me," he said softly. "Just for a while. No cameras. No lines." She hesitated, staring at his hand resting near hers. The noise of the bar faded, all she could hear was the echo of her own heartbeat. Then, slowly, she whispered, "Just for a while." When they stepped outside, the street was empty. And for the first time in her life, she realized, some decisions don't feel like choices. They feel like gravity. The city looked different that night. Quieter. Slower. Like it knew what they were about to do and chose not to interrupt. He didn't take her hand as they walked, they didn't need to. The space between them buzzed with something unspoken, something that had been building for weeks. When the car stopped in front of the hotel, she hesitated. "We shouldn't," she whispered. "I know." Then why are we here? He looked at her, not like a man asking for permission, but like someone who'd already crossed the line. Because it's the only place where we don't have to lie. The lobby was empty. The receptionist barely looked up. It all felt too easy, too quiet, like fate had made room for their mistake. Inside the room, the air smelled like new linen and something forbidden. She placed her purse on the chair, her hands trembling slightly. He poured 2 glasses of wine and handed her one. To the film, he said with a faint smile. To the end of it, she corrected. They sat for a while, talking about meaningless things, the director's temper, the long days on set, how strange it felt now that it was over. But every word was a delay. Every silence was a confession. Do you ever think about what happens after? She asked. All the time, he said. But it never looks like this. The lights from the city slipped through the curtains, painting soft gold lines across the room. She turned toward him, and for the first time, there was no script, no director, no reason to pretend. He touched her hand, slow, uncertain. Say it, he murmured. Tell me this is just acting. She tried to. She opened her mouth, but the lie wouldn't come out. He leaned closer, his forehead against hers. Then don't. And in that moment, with no cameras, no lines, no audience, she stopped being the woman everyone thought she was. The actress. The wife. The professional. She was just her, and he was the first person in years who looked at her like that was enough. Their lips met, soft at first, then desperate, then real. Time dissolved. Guilt vanished. The world outside didn't matter anymore. When she woke the next morning, sunlight slipped across the sheets, and reality returned like a tide. He was sitting by the window, half-dressed, staring out at the city. What happens now? She asked quietly. He didn't turn. Now? He smiled sadly. Now we go back to pretending. He looked at her, his eyes tired but gentle. But you'll never be just a scene to me. And for the first time, she didn't know whether to smile or cry. She thought the morning after would bring regret. It didn't, not right away. Regret came later, quietly, like a shadow that followed her home. The film wrapped. The call stopped. The silence between them became its own kind of ache. She told herself it was better that way. That one night didn't mean anything. That she could slip back into her old life, wife, actress, normal woman, like nothing had happened. But then the interviews began. The posters appeared in the city, her face, his face, side by side. Articles called them the perfect on-screen couple. Journalists wrote about their undeniable chemistry, their raw connection. And every word felt like exposure. Her husband showed her one of the trailers one night while they ate dinner. He laughed. You two look like you actually fell in love for real. She forced a smile, her fork pausing midair. Good acting, I guess. He nodded, not seeing how her hands trembled beneath the table. Later that night, she lay awake, scrolling through social media. Every clip, every fan comment, every photo from the set felt like a wound. You can't fake that kind of love. Their eyes say everything. She turned off her phone, pressing it against her chest as if it could quiet her heartbeat. She hadn't heard from him in weeks. Not a message. Not a call. Nothing. Until one morning, as she sipped her coffee, a notification appeared. A text. From him. I watched it last night. The final cut. We look real. Her fingers hovered over the keyboard. Because we were. She typed, then deleted it. Instead, she wrote. Congratulations. It's beautiful. He replied after a minute. It was us. She stared at the screen until her vision blurred. Her husband called from the other room, asking if she wanted another cup. She wiped her eyes quickly and said, yeah, please. And in that moment, she realized she was living 2 lives. One in the daylight, one in the dark. That evening, she saw his interview online. The reporter asked, "What made your performance so convincing?" He paused, smiled faintly, and said, "Sometimes the truth finds its way into the script." The audience laughed. She didn't. Because she knew what he meant. The night of the premiere felt unreal. Flashlights. Cameras. Applause. Everyone called it her best performance, but they didn't know she wasn't acting. He was there too, in a black suit, smiling for the crowd. Their eyes met for a second, just long enough to remember everything. No words. No gestures. Just a look that said we both know. When the movie played, and their kiss appeared on the giant screen, the audience sighed. Her husband leaned closer and whispered, "You two were perfect together." She smiled faintly. "Yeah, we were." Afterward, as the lights came up, she turned, but he was already gone. Only an empty seat where he'd been. Her phone buzzed once. No cameras this time. Just goodbye. She didn't reply. She didn't need to. Because some stories aren't meant to end. They just fade into memory, frame by frame,